All right, so we're diving deep today into something pretty crucial for anyone who wants to make learning stick.
Mm.
And that's designing learning activities that really get people involved,
Yeah, yeah.
not just kind of sitting back and passively absorbing information.
Right.
We're talking about getting them to do things and make connections.
That.
And, you sent over these excerpts from a guide called
Yeah.
Designing Engaging Do and Connect Activities.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and it seems like a pretty perfect place to start.
Absolutely.
So think of this as our crash course in how to make learning actually memorable.
Like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to break down what makes these activities work,
Right.
see how they play out in the real world, and maybe even leave you with some questions that will keep you thinking long after we're done here.
I like that.
So the guide jumps right into these do and connect activities.
Right.
And do seems pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about action.
Yeah.
We're talking about words like discover, analyze, debate,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the big one, applying what you've learned.
Right. Using it.
Yeah.
Not just knowing it.
Exactly. And that's where connect comes in.
Yes.
It's about bridging the gap between the idea and how it actually works in real life.
Absolutely connecting it to something, you know?
And I loved how the guide actually quotes Alfred North Whitehead here.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought it was brilliant.
He's a smart guy.
He says, beware of inert ideas, ideas that are merely received into the mind without being utilized or tested or thrown into fresh combination.
I love that quote.
Right. It really highlights the problem with just passively taking in information.
Yeah, it just sits there.
Right.
If you never do anything with it, what good is it?
It's almost useless at that point.
Yeah, it's like having a toolbox full of tools you never use.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Right. So do is about actually practicing, and connect is about
Yeah.
putting those things into context
Exactly.
and creating something new.
Right.
But yeah, the guide also mentions that sometimes the line between the two can get a little fuzzy.
Yeah, a little blurry.
Does that make it harder to design effective activities?
It can seem that way, when you're trying to categorize everything perfectly.
Right.
But I think the real key here is to just make sure people are actively learning no matter what we call it.
I like that.
It doesn't matter if an activity fits neatly into do or connect, as long as it gets people engaged.
Right. Yeah, and thinking critically about what they're learning.
Absolutely.
So for example, let's say you're teaching about climate change.
Okay, yeah.
A connect activity could be having students think about how their own daily choices impact the environment.
Exactly.
Okay.
It gets them connecting the concept to their own lives.
Yeah.
Which is so much more powerful than just reading about greenhouse gases in a textbook.
Right. And speaking of applying things, even this deep dive that we're doing right now,
Oh, yeah.
this is a kind of a connect activity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're listening to this.
Yeah.
And you probably have a very specific reason for wanting to design better learning activities.
Hmm.
Some of you might be developing training programs, or others are just trying to figure out how to learn new things more effectively.
Right.
But just imagine if this were a lecture
Oh,
where
God.
you just sat and passively absorbed information.
Yeah.
Do you think you would get as much out of it?
I doubt it. I mean, you need to actually apply the ideas.
You need to connect them to your own experiences.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to this interesting connection between activities and assessment.
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so activities are the learning process itself,
Mhm.
right? That's how we learn by doing.
Yeah.
But assessments are how we figure out if someone actually understands what they've learned.
Okay.
So they seem like two different things.
Right.
But here's the thing. A lot of activities are actually assessments in disguise.
Oh, I like that.
The guide uses this great analogy,
Yeah, right.
baking a cake.
I remember that. I love a good analogy.
So you're baking a cake, right? That's an activity.
Yes.
But it also shows you how good of a baker you are.
Oh, that's true.
You're getting feedback the whole time as you mix the batter.
Mhm.
See how the cake rises in the oven?
Right.
So are all activities assessments. Not necessarily.
Okay.
But if you're grading an activity,
Yeah.
then yes, it absolutely needs to be considered an assessment.
Because that grade gives you direct feedback on whether you get it.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to make sure that your learning objectives, the activities you're using, and the assessments you're giving all line up.
So they're all working together.
Yeah, it's like a chain reaction.
Right.
The objective drives the activity, which then feeds into how you measure understanding.
I see.
And you're right, we've talked about a lot today.
Yeah. Do activities connect activities?
The pitfalls of passive learning.
That's right. The
Yeah.
link between activities and assessments.
We've really only scratched the surface.
It feels like There's always more to learn about learning.
Always.
But as we wrap up here,
Yeah.
I'd love to leave you with a question.
Okay.
How can you take what we've discussed today and actually design activities that transform those passive learners
Right.
into active, engaged participants?
That's the $1 million question.
And the guide that you shared actually has some fantastic resources